You may have seen in the news that average asking rents in Canada have been falling for almost a year now, but that doesn't tell the full story of what's happening across the country. So today, I want to talk about the regional variations we've seen in rents across Canada over the past several years. First, looking at the overall national trend for the past 6 years, what we saw was a brief decline in rents during the pandemic, followed by a few years of rapid growth, then another decline over the past year and a half. This trend is mainly driven by Ontario, which, as you can see, is basically a more extreme version of the national trend. However, we did see the periods of falling rents affect Ontario more than the growth periods, with the difference between Ontario and the national average narrowing from almost $500 to only $200. In BC and Alberta, we saw rents remain fairly flat throughout the pandemic, followed by rapid growth, then a modest pullback. Alberta closed the gap from about $400 less than the national average to just $200, with BC increasing from close to the national average to about $400 above. In Nova Scotia, on the other hand, we saw rents growing pretty steadily over the entire past 6 years, going from about $200 below the national average to roughly $150 above. This is heavily influenced by the Halifax area, which has seen a large influx of interprovincial migration over the past decade. If we want to see the entire national picture, we can look at this chart, which shows the deviation from the national average asking rent, which is to say, how far is each province from the national average as a percentage. The chart looks a little chaotic, but the trend we've been seeing, particularly in the last few years, is that the range is narrowing. The most expensive provinces are pulling back towards the national average, while the most affordable provinces are continuing to see rent growth towards the national average. Rents are starting to converge towards the mid-market, and there's less variation between the expensive and affordable markets across the country. This follows the trends of interprovincial migration as people become more mobile and able to work from anywhere, with people leaving the highest-priced cities and seeking out lower cost-of-living areas. As a result, the national trends in rent prices are felt very, very differently based on what part of the country you live in. This chart shows the change in rent in each province over the past 6 years compared to the overall inflation in the Consumer Price Index, which includes rent, but also includes all other goods and services like groceries, utilities, and transportation. As you can see, Nova Scotia has had the most dramatic rent growth, with almost an 80% increase since 2019, with rents in Atlantic Canada, BC, and Quebec generally increasing faster than inflation, while the Prairies saw rent growth that was more in line with overall inflation. Contrary to what you might expect, Ontario actually saw very minimal growth in asking rents over the last 6 years, with rents increasing significantly slower than the overall cost of living. This is mainly because Ontario saw larger rent decreases than other areas over the same time period, so while there was still a period of rapid growth in the years after the pandemic, it was mostly offset by the reductions that happened before and after. Ontario also saw the largest negative interprovincial migration in the country, with over 100,000 more people moving out of the province than moved in over the last 5 years. So hopefully that gives a little more context to the national rent numbers you've been seeing. If you want more information, you can check out the full national rent report at Rentals.ca and follow here for more analysis. See you next time.